Hey guys, welcome to this session by Intellipaat. Splunk is one of these tools that is a beautiful thing when it comes to handling machine generated data, especially large amounts of data, where it gives you a user interface where you can work with your data, view it, analyze it, and of course monitor it as well. Now, Splunk is something which is very popular today, and with this comes a huge demand and competition in the interviews too. Now, keeping this in mind, we here at Intellipaat have come up with the top Splunk interview questions and answer set video where we'll be covering a lot of things from the basics to the advanced questions. Well guys, before we begin with this session, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so that you'll never miss any updates from us. And now, without further ado, let's start with the session.
So coming to the first question on the top Splunk interview questions and answers set, it says compare Splunk with Spark. Now, when the comparison is always the talk between Splunk and Spark, you really have to talk about three important criteria. The first one is the deployment area. See, whenever we talk about deployment area, what happens in Splunk is that it collects a large amounts of machine generated data and it keeps it for storing and it keeps it for further processing there. But why do we use Spark in terms of deployment? Well, here we have iterative applications and we make use of in-memory processing, which is slightly faster than what Splunk does, in a production environment. And then coming to the second criteria, which is nature of the tool. Well, as you might already know it, Splunk is a proprietary tool. It's going to cost some money to go on to implement Splunk, while Spark is actually from the Apache Foundation and hence it is open source. And then third thing, when we talk about the working mode, Splunk works on the streaming mode and Spark here has a slight edge compared to Splunk because here it can work both with streaming and of course with respect to batch mode data too. In that particular case, whenever you talk about Splunk and compare it to Spark, make sure that you always talk about these 3 points because these are what gives the complete difference that exists between Splunk and Spark in a major way. Coming to question number 2. Question number 2 states, what is Splunk? Well, Splunk is, there is one very nice way to say this. It is that Splunk is the Google for all the machine generated data that we have out there. What is it? Well, it is actually a software or an engine where, we can use it for search. We can use to work with data. We can use to visualize the data, monitor data. We can perform amazing reporting with large amounts of data, what we call as enterprise data, coming from organizations too. So it takes in all the valuable machine data, and with this data at the end of it, right? So we're going to take in raw data and convert it into very good insights. We're going to convert it into actually useful information which will help us drive real-time insights, and that there is a huge advantage because here we can have a lot of visual dashboards, we can have charts, we can have alerts, we can have reports, and many things can be done with Splunk. Coming to question number 3. Question number 3 states, what are the common port numbers used by Splunk? Well, this is a very common question, in fact, in the interview, so you definitely should know at least 3 or 4 port numbers, but then it is very easy to remember them. The Splunk web port operates on port number 8000. We have Splunk management port on 8089, and we have the indexing port on 9997. And of course, and I think you'll already know the index replication port, that's 8080. And then you have the network port 514, which is again a common thing, and you should know it at this point of time. And of course, the KV store, which goes towards 8191. So these are some of the 6 common port numbers for the services attached in case of Splunk. So it is highly recommended that you guys note this down. And then coming to question number 4. Question number 4 states, what are the components of Spark, and explain the Spark architecture. Well, you can explain the architecture by the components themselves because using these components is how it works, right? There are 4 main important components. We have the search head, we have indexer, we have forwarder, and of course the deployment server. So what does the search head do? The search head will provide an user interface for the person to actually go on to perform some searching, as the name suggests, and working with the data with a good and an easy to use stable user interface. That's the important thing. And then when we talk about indexer is actually used to index the machine data that's incoming, and of course we have the forwarder will forward all of the logs to the indexer itself, and then we have the deployment server. In case if we have a distributed environment where you're managing multiple Spark components at the same time, then you'll have to work on the deployment server. You have to configure it, and you have to make sure that the indexer and forwarder talk right to the data and then pull it out, and of course deploy it as per requirement on the visual outbound servers too. In particular case, all in all, it's a very simple thing of how you can explain the working of a Splunk, but do talk about these 4 components as these are the most important things that exist in Splunk. And then coming to the 5th question, it states, which is the latest Splunk version in use? Well, at the creation of this particular video, we have Splunk 8.0.6, which is the latest stable version out there right now. Of course, if you're watching this at a much later date, then you'll have to check out the Splunk website to find out what the latest stable release is. And based on that, you can answer this question in the interview. And then coming to the sixth question, it says, what is Splunk Indexer and what are the stages of Splunk indexing? See, what is the Splunk Indexer? Indexer is basically one of these components that helps in how we can create the indexes and of course manage them in a very easy way and then using an interface, right? But now why would we require the indexer? Indexer is needed for two important things. One is to make sure we can process all the incoming data in a structured way, and it provides us the ability where we can look at the ingested data, search through it, sift through it, and pick up whatever is required easily as well. So to have a structured way of ingesting the data and then to have a user interface talk to this data to pull it all up, we require the indexer. As I mentioned in a previous question, this is a very important component in the Splunk enterprise architecture. And then coming to the seventh question, it states, what is a Splunk forwarder and what are the types of Splunk forwarders? See, a Splunk forwarder is something which we already discussed, right? It is again a very important component that talks with the indexer. Now, there are two types of Splunk forwarders that you really have to know. It's the universal forwarder, or short for UF. So you might be asked this as a separate question. And then we have the HWF, which is a very common entity, which is the heavyweight forwarder. Now, what happens with the universal forwarder is that the Splunk agent gets installed on a non-Splunk system where we'll actually want to pick up the data from. So in that particular case, it cannot parse or index the data directly there. And then we have the heavyweight forwarder. Heavyweight forwarder will bring the entire advanced functionalities of Splunk, and it brings a full instance of Splunk basically to work with it. So it actually works like a remote collector, or you can think of as an intermediate forwarder as well, because it has the capability to parse the data and work with the data, and that is one of the reasons why it is actually not preferred for a production environment too. So most of the time we make use of universal forwarders, but then there are certain cases, certain custom requirements where we do have to make use of HWFs. So if you are asked follow-up questions from our initial question regarding all the components, well, you have the answers to them now. And then coming to the eighth question, it states, can you name a few most important configuration files in Splunk? This is a very common question, and guys, pay attention on this because you'll at least have to name 2 or 3 configuration files in Splunk. And if you're at this point of time in this video, you really should know this. We have multiple configuration files, right? We have props.conf, we have the indexes, we have inputs, we have transforms, we have servers. So we have a lot of configuration files present for a lot of things in Splunk. And if you can name at least 3 or 4, it will definitely add value to your candidature. And then coming to the ninth question, it states, what are the types of Splunk licenses that are out there? Well, there are many Splunk licenses out there, and these guys are always coming up with something new to make sure that a lot of people can jump in and make use of Splunk. But as of now, we have the enterprise license, we have a free license as well, we have the forwarder license, beta license, and if you're looking for only distributed searching, then you have license for search heads, and if you're looking for only index replication, then of course we have the licenses for cluster members too. So depending on your requirement, you would pick up one particular license. The most common, the most picked up license from this particular list would definitely be the enterprise license because of all the features and tools and methodologies that you can use. It brings the entire power of Splunk. And then coming to the 10th question, it states, what is Splunk app? Well, Splunk app, as the name suggests, is a container in itself. It's a directory which consists of 3 very important things. It contains of the 4 configurations of all the data that we're working at. It contains of all the searches, and it has the indexed dashboard entities in it as well. In that particular case, it's a very important container and a directory which houses these 3 entities, and it makes it very important that you know what it is and of course what it contains too. Now with this, coming to the 11th question, it states, where is the Splunk default configuration stored? Well, Splunk default configuration is stored at this particular location, Splunk home, etc, system, and default. You will be asked a lot of questions like this, so we're going to be discussing more on this in a while as well. Coming to the 12th question, it says, what are the features that are not available in Splunk free? Well, this will definitely be a follow-up question for the for when you had to answer the license question, right? In that particular case, do talk about these 3 or 4 features. For example, Splunk free does not include scheduling, searching, alerting, or authentication. You will not get deployment management. You will not get forwarding, for example, HTTP or via TCP to a non-Splunk environment too. And of course, you will not have distributed search in the case of Splunk free. Well, depending on the requirements, sometimes you can get away with all of these, but then since the enterprise version does it really well, that's the reason people pick it all up. And if you have a staunch requirement, for example, for deployment management, you will definitely be looking at the enterprise license. And then coming to the 13th question, it states, what happens if the license master is unreachable? Well, one thing for sure is that when the license master is not available, there is a slave in place. What it will do is that it will start a 24-hour timer, and after this 24-hour time ends, all the searches will be blocked on the particular licensing slave. But if the searches stop, you might be wondering, does indexing stop? No, the indexing can continue, but searching is blocked for that particular time when using the license slave. But then if you're wondering about how can users search the data for that slave, well, in that particular case, again, until you actually have the license master, again, the users will not be able to search for the data in the slave license. So that is one very important point that you definitely should mention. And then coming to the 14th question, it states, what is summary index in Splunk? Summary index is again the default Splunk index that we have. The index we use for the Splunk enterprise users in case if we do not use another one. So this is a common Splunk index. What we do is, if we have a plan to, let's say, run a variety of summary index report of our choice, you will have to create additional summary indexes to go on with this particular reports, right? For that particular case, to club all of these under one header, we make use of a summary index. Now, coming to the 15th question, it states, what is Splunk DB Connect? DB, as the name suggests, stands for database. So Splunk DB Connect is actually a generic SQL database plugin that we use in Splunk to make sure that we can have the capability to easily integrate any sort of DB information that we want with all of the Splunk reports that are generated, and of course the Splunk queries too. So to go on to do that, to connect it physically, you will require this. You will require a Splunk DB Connect to go on to do this. This is a very important plugin, and I'm sure if you're at this video, you would already know about this plugin. And then coming to the 16th question, it states, can you write down a general regular expression for extracting the IP address from logs? Now, see, there are many ways of how one can extract IP addresses from logs, right? But most of the time we use regular expressions. In the regular expression, you can go on to actually use two regular expressions, as you can see on your screen, and this is the easiest way of how one can go on to pick up the IP address. And if you're wondering about the formatting, yes, every IP address has a certain formatting that you'll have to follow, and that is what we are hard coding in the regular expression to make sure that we can get the decimal output where the numbers, for example, if it's a 192.168.1.1, right? So there are 3 dots and we have to have numbers that give these dots meaning, and of course at the end of it we'll have the IP address, and that's what we are indicating using the regular expression on your screen. I would highly recommend you pause the video and do take a note of it. And then coming to the 17th question, it says, explain stats versus transaction commands. See, what is a transaction command when you whenever we're talking about transaction command, right, you'll have to talk about its use case primarily because it has two amazing use cases in a way. For the first thing is that whenever we have a unique ID, let's say from one or many other fields that we have, this unique ID alone will actually not be enough to discriminate between two transactions and say it apart basically. And then when this is the case, what happens is that the identifier gets reused. Let's say you have web sessions where you have cookies and client IP addresses, right? Here the time span, or how we actually pause, is actually used to assess the data and convert it into transactions and then work with it. And of course, whenever any sort of identifier is reused, think about DHCP dynamic logs. There is a message that identifies and shows the beginning or end of a transaction. And whenever it is desirable to actually see the raw text of events combined, it is possible to do so through the logs. And then if there's any other cases than this, let's say, which is very different from what we just discussed in that particular case, it is definitely recommended to go on to use stats instead of transaction commands. So why would you use stats? Well, the performance of a stat command is definitely a lot higher. It is more efficient and it can be used very well in the case of a distributed search environment. That is the biggest difference in my opinion. And of course, if you have a unique ID, then the stat command can definitely be used in that particular case. So this is the basic difference that lies in between when you should make use of stats and of course when you should make use of transaction commands too. And then coming to the 18th question, it says how to troubleshoot Splunk performance issues. Well, as you might already know it, I don't think I really have to tell this. This is a very important question, right? So, the interviewer will be looking for a couple of important points. Do not stretch on this question a lot, because you really have to keep it concise on this one. See, there's lots of ways of how you can troubleshoot Splunk for performance. The first thing is that you'll be looking at the Splunk d.log. You will look at the log and find out if there is any errors, and then after you have checked the log, if there are no errors, you'll go on to check the server performances. For example, the CPU loading. You'll be checking what's the usage on the memory, what's the disk input output, read speed, write speed, if everything is fine with that or not. And after doing this, you'll install the SOS. SOS is basically the Splunk on Splunk app. This is used to check for any sorts of errors or warnings that might occur on the dashboard. Now, after this is done, you can check the number of saved searches currently that is running and that is consuming all of the system resources, remove what's not required, and keep what's required too. And there's another thing you can do is that you can install and enable Firebug. Firebug is basically an extension in Firefox. There you can log on to Splunk and of course open all its panels. You can click the net panel, and in the net panel it will show you all the requests and the responses that's required, where the time spent in each. And with this you can get a lot of information of understanding where a Splunk is actually hanging through, where the requests are blameless, and of course using this kind of a data you will have a clear clarity of where there is a bottleneck in the particular issue that's causing the Splunk to slow down. In that particular case, I definitely think these are some of the most important keywords and points that you should convey to the interviewer when you're asked this particular question. And then coming to the 19th question, it states, what are buckets? See, Splunk places all of the index data into directories, and this directory itself is buckets. It actually is a physical directory that will contain all of the events of what happened in a certain particular period. Now, what a bucket does is that it is not a stagnant entity, because at the end of the day it is used a lot, right? So it has multiple stages as it goes through, as the data moves through around it. We have the hot, warm, cold, and frozen states. Let's talk about the hot state. What happens when we say a bucket is hot, or it's a hot bucket, is that it will contain brand new data. It will contain newly indexed data. It can open to be written. There'll be more than one hot bucket for every single index through which it can be written, and which contains newly indexed data too. And then when do we say a bucket is warm? We say a bucket is warm when it consists of data rolled out from the hot bucket itself, right? So you can have many warm buckets as soon as the data starts pouring in out of your hot buckets. And then of course we have a cold bucket. A cold bucket is defined when we have the data that gets pulled out of a warm bucket. As the name suggests, I think you guys understand where this is going, right? Again, there can be many number of cold buckets too. But what's a frozen bucket? A frozen bucket will of course contain data that's coming out of a cold bucket. But here what happens is that the indexer deletes the frozen data by default, and if you want to have the data, you can archive it too. And then if you want the archived data to be thawed later, you can do that and have access to the data too. But then understand one very important thing when you're talking about a frozen bucket is that the data in frozen bucket is not searchable. That is, I think, definitely one of the important points you should mention to the interviewer. And then coming to the 20th question, it states, what is the difference between stats and event stats commands, right? So stats commands, as you already know, as we already checked out, it will give you the summary statistics of all of the existing fields that we have in the search results, and it ensures that we can save them as values in the new fields that we have for requirement as well. But what is event stats? Event stats, as the name suggests, in fact, is actually very similar to the stat command. But one very important thing here you have to know is that the aggregation results are added inline for every single agent. They're attached to every single agent, and only this is done if the aggregation is pertinent to that particular event. That is the primary difference. The event stat command actually computes all the requested statistics, just like how the stats does, but aggregates them and puts them all towards the original raw data too. So these are two very important points that you should state whenever you're asked between the differences between stats and the event stat commands. And then coming to the 21st question, it says, what are the top direct competitors to Splunk? Well, there are many competitors to Splunk, especially in today's world, but then four really big names come into the picture. One is Logstash, we have Loggly, we have the LogLogic, and of course Sumo Logic. These four are considered to be the top direct competitors to Splunk. And of course, again, based on your requirement, based on budgeting, and based on the catering, based on the offering and the tool sets required, you will go on to pick one of these in case if Splunk does not do the job for the requirement. And then coming to the 22nd question, it says, what do Splunk licenses specify? Well, Splunk license contain one very important thing. It's how much of data can we index for every single day, right? This is how everything works based on the licenses, and that's the most important thing of why you can have it customized to your particular requirement. I think this is something that you should really know at this point in time. And then coming to the 23rd question, it states, how does Splunk determine one day from the licensing perspective? Well, one day is actually calculated from a midnight to the next midnight basis of the clock on the license master. So from tonight to, let's say, tomorrow night is considered to be from 12 a.m. to the next occurring 11:59 a.m. is considered to be one day for the licensing aspect of things. And then coming to the 24th question, it says, how are forwarder license purchased? Well, you really do not have to purchase a forwarder license separately because these come included with Spark. And this is probably a trick question that the interviewer might ask you, but then, you should know the answers. There's no need to purchase it separately, and that it is included with Splunk itself. And then coming to the 25th question, what is the command for restarting the Splunk web server? See, there's one simple command to restart a Splunk web server. It's Splunk start Splunk web, right? The last word is something that's going to change a lot whenever you're restarting stuff in Splunk. So remember that it's Splunk start Splunk web. Now, how can you restart the Splunk daemon? In that particular case, you'll just have to change the entity of what you're starting. In this particular case, it's going to be Splunk start Splunk D. Splunk D actually denotes Splunk daemon. As you can see, these are sometimes tricky commands that you will have to remember. But then if there is a rapid fire kind of a thing in the interview, you can pretty sure answer that by now. And then coming to the 27th question, it says, what is the command used to check the running Splunk process on Unix or Linux? Well, whenever you want to check if the Splunk enterprise processes are working on Linux and Unix, you can use one simple command. It's psaux, and of course you can grep Splunk to see if that particular operation is running or not. It's a very simple thing, but then of course it is very vital that you actually know this particular answer to this question. And then coming to the 28th question, it says, what is the command used for enabling Splunk to boot start? Well, to enable Splunk to boot start, you'll just have to use Splunk enable boot -start. You'll have to use the following command. You'll have to go into that particular directory and then type in that particular command, Splunk enable boot -start. Don't forget the hyphen, because a lot of times you've seen a lot of people forget the hyphen there. So it's boot -start. And then coming to the 29th question, this can be a follow-up to the 28th question itself, which is, how do you disable Splunk boot start? So instead of the word Splunk enable boot start, it's Splunk disable boot start. Pretty simple, right? Even though it's simple, it's straightforward. Again, as I told you, it's vital that you have to know how you can enable and disable the boot start. And then coming to the 30th question, it states, what is source type in Splunk? Well, source type is one very important way of how we can actually identify the data in Splunk even before working on it. When the data is being ingested, when the data is being indexed and worked with, you really have to know how Splunk itself can identify the data, right? That is what source type indicates in Splunk. And then coming to the 31st question, it states, how to reset Splunk admin password. Well, resetting the Splunk admin password is pretty easy, but then it depends on the version of Splunk you're using. If you're using anything above 7.1, you will have to follow a simple set of steps. Now, the first thing is that you'll have to stop the Splunk enterprise from running, and then you'll have to find a file called as passwd, or password for short, and then you have to rename it to password.bk. bk basically indicates backup, and then of course you have to create a file called as user seed configuration in one of the directories, etc, system and local, and in this particular file you'll just have to write in one command, user info password equal to new password. In that new underscore password section, all you have to do is put in the new password and then restart the Splunk enterprise, use the new password to log in, and you are good to go. So have the password file, rename it to a backup, and then go to etc system local, create a file called as user seed configuration, and that put in user underscore info in big brackets, and then password equal to the password you want, restart the Splunk enterprise, log in with the new password, and you are done. Pretty simple, right? But then you have to know this process in this particular order only. And then coming to the 32nd question, it says, how to disable Splunk launch messages. Well, to disable Splunk launch messages, it is pretty simple. There's one particular entity that you have to change value for its offensive. Just set the value of offensive to be less in the Splunk launch configuration file, and you are good to go. This disables the launch message in Splunk. So set the offense equal to less value in which file? In Splunk underscore launch configuration file. And then coming to the 33rd question, it states, how to clear Splunk search history. Well, clearing Splunk search history is something which is very simply done by using one command, Splunk underscore home var log Splunk, and then you have to go to searches.log. So you can go onto this particular phase and delete the file searches.log in that particular folder, and all of this will clear the Splunk search history. And then coming to the 34th question, it states, what is Btool? How will you troubleshoot Splunk configuration files? Btool is just one of the command line interfaces tools that we use to troubleshoot configuration file issues that we have, or let's say if there's any values that need to have our attention in the particular Splunk Enterprise installation in the environment that already exists. So in that particular case, we are going to use Btool. As I just mentioned, you'll have to check out for values that are being used by the enterprise and then go on to work with troubleshooting the same. And then coming to the 35th question, it says, what is the difference between Splunk app and Splunk add-on? See, even before we talk about a difference, one commonality is that both will contain pre-configured configurations, reports, and a lot of other things. But what the Splunk app does not have, it's a visual app. In that particular case, a Splunk app will already come with a pre-configured visual app, while Splunk add-on does not come with a visual app. That is one of the big differences that lie in between Splunk app and the Splunk add-on is the pre-configured appearance of the visual app. Make sure to mention that. And then coming to the 36th question, it says, what is the .conf file precedence in Splunk? Well, the file precedence is as follows. From the highest priority to the lowest priority, you of course have the system local directory first, and then at a slight lower priority, you have the app local directories, and then you have the app default directories, and the lowest priority in terms of configuration file precedence goes to system default directory. So always whenever you're mentioning this, especially when answering questions about precedence, you can either start from low priority or high priority, but then do go in the order, and that's something which is very vital, and I'm sure you guys already know it. And then coming to the 37th question, it states, what is Fishbucket and what is Fishbucket index? Fishbucket is again a directory or an index that we use, which is present at the default location. It's basically opt splunk var lib splunk. It is a directory that's present there. And what does it contain? Well, it contains all the seek pointers and the CRCs for all of the files that we are trying to index, right? So it is done to make sure that the Splunk daemon can tell us if it has already been read or it has not been read. That is one of the major use cases of a Fishbucket. But then how can you access it? It can be accessed through the user interface by searching for index equal to underscore the Fishbucket. And you can work with it very easily. But then do remember what you'll be searching for. It's index equal to underscore the Fishbucket. So coming to the 38th question, it says, how can I understand when Splunk has finished indexing a log file? So you can figure out if Splunk has finished indexing a log file or not when you look at the metrics that are present in the particular log. So by watching all the details in the particular log, you can check the split by source type, and here you can have for example, let's say if you're having trouble with the data input and you want to troubleshoot it all the way, you can check your whitelist or blacklist rules to see if they're working the way they're not. To do that, you have to go to Splunk course 80A9 services, admins, and input status. Here you can check out if there is any sort of trouble with the data input. But then of course, by watching how everything splits by the data source individually, you can understand if it has finished indexing a log file or not. And then coming to the 39th question, it states, how to set the default search time in Splunk. So to do this in Splunk Enterprise, it is pretty easy. We have to use the UI-prefs or the user interface preferences configuration files, and you'll just have to change one value that's present in the default setting. For example, Splunk underscore home etc system/local, and here we'll have the UI prefs.config file, right? So you'll just have to search for dispatch.earliest underscore time equal to @b, and of course dispatch.latest underscore time equal to now. This makes sure that you can set the default search time in Splunk very easily, and then the default time range for all the users in the search app will be today or the current date of when you are changing that to. So it's a very simple question. It's a straightforward answer to this particular question. And then coming to the 40th question, it states, what is dispatch directory? Well, dispatch directory, where is it? It's in Splunk underscore home, where run Splunk and dispatch, right? So this is one of the directories where every single search is contained. For example, if the search is either running or if the search is complete, you will find details about it here. Now let's say there's a directory which is named 143430894.358 or anything for that matter, and this will contain a CSV file for each of its search result. There's a file which is called search.log, and this search.log will contain all the details about the search execution and a lot of other stuff too. So by using the defaults, right, you can override the limits.config, and these directories will be deleted 10 minutes after the search completes. It's a very important thing that you have to know, and the user really should save the search results, and in that particular case the results will get deleted after 7 days. And then coming to the 41st question, it states, why are you applying for this Splunk role in our company? Now guys, this is again a very important question that do not get carried away. Again guys, this is a very important question where you really should not get carried away with the answer, because the interviewer is trying to understand why you've applied for their particular company. Now talk about why Splunk is even required for that company, how Splunk can add value to the company, of course how Splunk is already doing that, right? And it's not only how Splunk can do what it's doing for their company, talk about how you being a member, what you bring to the table as well. But then to answer this effectively, right, see, they're trying to understand if you understood the job description completely or not. So you really are going to need details about the company itself, the job description, and all the details that go with it to help you convince the interviewer that you know why you want this job, and of course your interest towards Splunk and why this particular company in question as well. So for that particular case, you will require the understanding of the company, the job description, why Splunk is important for them, and what you bring to the table too. And then coming to the 42nd question, it says, what is the difference between search head pooling and search head clustering? Well, both of these are features that is provided by Splunk, where we're talking about a high availability of any sort of search head in any cases where let's say if the search head goes down, right? But if the search head cluster is newly introduced, in that particular case the pooling will be removed from the next consecutive versions, and this is something that you should already know about. Well, but then here what happens is that the search head cluster gets managed by a captain, and the captain controls all of the particular slaves. So doing this, right, so what using search head cluster does is that it makes it extremely reliable, and of course it makes it very efficient to use search head pooling too. In that particular case it goes hand in hand, and the slight difference is there, and you definitely have to mention that when you ask this question. And then coming to the 43rd question, it states, if I want to add folder access logs from a Windows machine to Splunk, how can I do it? Or first of all, can I even do it? If the answer if the question asks, can I do it? The answer is yes. And if there's a follow-up that says how I can do it, well, there are a couple of simple steps that you have to do. So you'll have to add folder access logs to Splunk. To do that, you'll have to enable the object access audit by using the group policy on the Windows machine of wherever the folder in question is located. After enabling auditing on that particular folder, you will have to check the logs. You'll have to check the logs firstly, and after that, just install the UF, right? Install the Splunk Universal Forwarder on the Windows machine itself and configure it to send all the security logs to the particular Splunk indexer. So first step is the most important one here. You'll have to edit the object access audit and using the group policy, and then you'll have to enable auditing, and then you'll have to then use the forwarder to go on to send all the logs to the indexer. And then coming to the 44th question, it states, how would you handle or troubleshoot Splunk license violation warnings? Well, Splunk license violation warnings means that you have used more than the purchase licensed quota, and you have indexed more data than you actually have to, and for what your license allows. So you'll have to identify what index, what source type has received more data than your usual limit, and then you'll have to check with the Splunk license master pool to check what's the available quota and identify which pool for which the violation has been present in. And then of course, once you get to know the pool where you're receiving more data, you can find the data source through which it's coming, and then of course you can work with it, identify it, find the source machine that's sending that to check if there is any sort of errors or if it requires any sort of troubleshooting to do too. So in that particular case, it's a pretty simple and a straightforward way of how you can handle the license violation warnings. Coming to the 45th question, it states, what is MapReduce algorithm? Well, MapReduce algorithm, in my opinion, is the secret of how Splunk's faster data searching works, right? It is one of these algorithms which is basically used for batch processed large amounts of data, or when we require a good amount of parallelization in a batch sized data scenario. And here, what it does, as the name suggests, map and reduce are actually two different functions, and it in fact gets the name from the functional programming aspects as well, mapping and reduction functions. Well, at this point of time, you really have to know that it is one of the reasons of why Splunk's data searching is really rapid and quick. And then coming to the 46th question, it states, how does Splunk avoid duplicate indexing of logs? See, what happens at the indexer is that Splunk will always keep a track of any sort of indexed event that happens in a directory, right? So we already discussed this. It's called as Fishbucket. And where does the Fishbucket lie in? It's opt splunk var lib / Splunk. It contains certain CRCs. It contains certain seek pointers for which details of all the files that we are indexing. So whenever the daemon checks it up, we can understand from the daemon to see if these files have been read or not. If they've already been read, it means that it's been duplicate index. If it's not been read, it means it's a unique file. And then coming to the 47th question, it states, what is your plan after joining for this Splunk developer role? Well, again, do not get carried away with this particular question. Answer it in a very concise way. And my suggestion to you guys is use a structured way of how you think you will spend your initial days in the company, of how you'll understand the existing architecture, how everything is working, how they are ingesting the data, their data sources, details about their licensing, and of course, what you will bring from your skill set or from your previous experience into the company itself, right? So whenever we talk about all the latest trends of what's going on with Splunk, there's always a lot of changes, and people at Splunk are making sure that latest and the greatest features are brought to the customers directly for their enterprise platform. So that particular case talk about how you are aligned towards understanding all the latest trends and of course jumping on them too. So that should add a lot of value to your answer. And then coming to the 48th question, it states, do you have any previous experience in Splunk? Well, it's a very straightforward question. If you are a fresher, of course, you'll be answering no, but then do not stop at that. Do talk about any sort of certification programs that you might have opted in for, or if you have put in any sort of experience where you've worked on an industry level project, right? Do talk about that. And then, of course, if you're a person who's already had some experience working in Splunk, then elaborate on that. Talk about what value you added to the team, what you did basically. You can of course elaborate on this particular answer, because this is where you can talk more than what's present on your resume for your previous experiences as well, because this gives the interviewer an idea of what you had done in the past and where you're coming from, and a lot of other details about your contribution to your previous companies too. And then coming to the 49th question, it states, do you possess any other skill that can add value to the Splunk developer role? Well, you should already know all of the skills that's required, all the primary skills that's required to become a Splunk developer and to work with Splunk, right? But there are other important skills that is extremely important. One definitely is communication skills. You'll have to know how Oracle SQL works. You're going to need skills in regular expressions. How can you, work with search queries and a lot of other things, right? So these, in my opinion, can be considered as primary skills itself, because without these, it becomes extremely difficult. And of course, if you do have any other skill that you think is going to add value based on that particular job description, based on what their requirement is, and if you can provide that, I highly suggest you talk about that, because it can help convince the recruiter, and of course it's going to add a lot of value to your candidature. And then coming to the last question, it says, have you earned any sort of certification to improve your learning and implementation process? See, one thing is that a certification program, especially in Splunk, is going to add a lot of value to your life, right? You will be taught by industry level experts. You will be open to communities across the globe. You will have a lot of material, lot of resources through which you'll be learning. A lot of hours of videos, a lot of instructor-led training, self-paced training, videos, assignment, quizzes. Basically everything that's needed to take you from a beginner to becoming proficient and expert in all of the concepts of Splunk, right? But all of this is good. This is for you. But then how do you talk and convey this to the interviewer? See, whenever you are certified, it tells the interviewer three things. One is that you want to advance your career in this particular domain. See, you might be coming from a digital marketing background, you might be coming from a very, very different background, and that you've put in certain time, money, and effort into learning Splunk and being certified in that. It means that you have an aspiration towards Splunk, and that you have the capabilities to learn it effectively in a short amount of time too. So these 3 points is going to add a lot of value to your candidature. But then, whenever you're answering this question, I highly suggest you elaborate on what you have done using the certification program than talking about the certification programs itself. Of course, if you have more than one certification, definitely list the certifications, but whenever you're talking about it, whenever you explain it right, explain about how it's helped you so far, what industry level projects you worked on, what experience you got out of it, and what problems did you solve by using this kind of a certification program, right? See, or everywhere the outcome is very important. Of course, any good certification program is going to give you a lot of knowledge about Splunk, but what adds value to them is what you learned and how well you use that at the end of the day.
We hope this Splunk interview questions and answer set was of help for you all. Well, with this, you can know how you can attack the questions and answer them to the best of your abilities. On that note, I wish you all the best for all your interviews. I hope you're keeping safe, and I'll see you on the next one.